With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yulana Weeks.
Our top stories.
Sedema encourages self-reliance within the region as geopolitical tensions rise globally.
Sentencing handed down in 2 separate wounding cases. St. Kitts Tourism Authority engages key partners at SMART and champions heritage tourism at OAS Congress. ECCB governor urges big push for ECCU economies amidst global economic anxiety. St. Lucia's Chamber warns of trade fallout from U.S. tariff move. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister says all eggs not in dragon basket. Internationally, 6 weeks into Israel's Gaza blockade, last food is running out. Now, the details.
Colorado State University issued its 2025 forecast for the Atlantic Basin hurricane season, signaling an above-normal season. The institution forecasted 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. The forecast comes amid rising geopolitical tensions, which have raised a concerning level of uncertainty about financial and technical support arrangements through traditional partnerships. Speaking at the official opening ceremony of the 16th meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency SEDEMA on April 8, Elizabeth Riley, Chief Executive Officer, said the membership has taken note of the concerns which are being assessed collectively.
We are all assessing the evolving implications of recent geopolitical shifts on our national as well as regional readiness. Signals are that some previous financial and technical support arrangements through traditional partnerships are now uncertain. There is already evidence of disruption to financial and technical support to CARICOM member states, affecting bilateral agreements and regional disaster risk management efforts.
This vulnerability of hazardous impacts and geopolitical tensions reiterates the need for SEDEMA member states to prepare. Identifying 4 key areas, Riley said the region has begun to pivot, identify mitigation measures to ensure operational readiness, and advance SEDEMA's strategic plan 2022 to 2027.
Whilst there are many things that we don't know, I think there are 4 things that are certain. 1 is that the geopolitical shifts have exposed the high risk exposure of our systems in the region, including the regional response mechanism. 2, that the Caribbean community must make an intentional pivot towards greater self-reliance by deepening and expanding national and regional capacity and capability, further pooling of our resources, and engaging new and non-traditional partners. This also reinforces the need for timely and full payment of contributions to the regional institutions which provide services to the regional response mechanism, as well as the provision of appropriate and adequate human resources within our national systems. So there are many levels at which we do have to be more intentional about our actions. Third, the opportunity exists to articulate a long-term strategic vision for the Caribbean community informed by strategic foresight, which builds sustained capacity and self-reliance in addressing the diverse and complex hazards which affect our people, and this opportunity must be grasped. And finally, at this midway juncture of our 5-year strategic plan, the strategic decision of our Council of Ministers in 2023 to move forward with the organizational restructuring of SEDEMA and to establish a multi-source trust fund which diversifies and provides sustainable financing for SEDEMA, it was a correct decision.
In 2024, the region encountered diverse and complex hazardous experiences, from wildfires in Brazil to an oil spill offshore of Tobago, excess heat waves, and Hurricane Beryl in the Windward Islands, reflective of the threats posed by climate change. As the 2025 Atlantic Basin hurricane season approaches, the region's vulnerability to hazards remains at the forefront of regional discussions.
Anthony Adams of West Farm St. Kitts will serve time at His Majesty's Prison following his sentencing for armed robbery and 2 counts of wounding with intent. The offenses, which occurred on June 18, 2019 in West Farm, have finally concluded in the courts. Adams was initially charged with attempted murder, armed robbery, and wounding with intent. He was formally arraigned on June 29, 2024, and subsequently found guilty on December 9, 2024 of armed robbery and both counts of wounding with intent. The details emerging from the court reveal a chilling account of the events. The court documents outlined Adams' involvement as an accessory in the armed robbery of 2 Ross University vet students. The incident occurred outside their home, a mere 60 meters from the Chimney Bar in West Farm at approximately 11:15 p.m. Adams knowingly provided the robber with his blue coverall to wear, facilitating the crime. Justice Ian Morley KC, in his sentencing remarks, highlighted Adams' role in assisting what he knew was to be a robbery at gunpoint. While Adams played no direct part in the subsequent events, his actions had severe consequences. During the robbery, the assailant attempted to murder Hannah Adamson, pressing the gun against her neck and pulling the trigger. Adamson managed to wriggle, causing the bullet to graze her and strike Jasandeep Guman, the driver, in the foot. Justice Morley sentenced Adams to 12 years imprisonment for the robbery, along with 3 years for each count of unlawful wounding against Hannah and Jasandeep. The sentences are to run concurrently, meaning the overall sentence is 12 years. Furthermore, the time Adams spent on remand will be factored into his sentence, and he will be eligible for 1/3 remission for good behavior. In a separate case, Orlando Hunkins of Camps Village, St. Kitts, has been sentenced to 4 months at His Majesty's Prison for the offense of wounding. Her Honor, Rhonda Nisbet Brown, sentenced him on April 7, 2025 at the District A Magistrate Court. Adams and Hunkins' sentencing serve as a reminder of the importance of accountability and the consequences of criminal actions within the Federation. The St. Kitts Tourism Authority continues its push to solidify the island's position as a premier Caribbean destination. Junisha Hanley, Caribbean Marketing Officer at the St. Kitts Tourism Authority, SKTA, participated in the St. Martin's annual regional trade show, SMART, from March 31st to April 4th, 2025. The event provided a crucial business-to-business platform facilitating collaboration and the exchange of insights among travel agents, tour operators, and global vendors within the tourism sector. According to the SKTA, Hanley engaged with several influential tour operators and vendors, including Copa Airlines, JetBlue Vacations, Air Canada Vacations, Hotel Beds USA Inc., Cruise Planners, Lamb Luxury Travel, and Hopscotch Tourism Netherlands. These interactions served as a springboard to promote St. Kitts and highlight upcoming events. Meanwhile, Ms. Tivana Wharton, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Tourism, represented St. Kitts and Nevis at the 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High Authorities of Tourism. This year's Congress was themed Harnessing the Power of Heritage Tourism for Development in the Americas. The OAS hosted the conference at its headquarters in Washington, D.C. During the Congress, Permanent Secretary Wharton delivered a presentation on policies and strategies for developing tourism in Afro-descendant communities. Her presentation emphasized the context, scope, and key policies of tourism development in these communities, highlighting the Federation's commitment to actively contributing to implementing the plan of action. According to Wharton, since 2022, under the leadership of Minister the Honorable Marsha T. Henderson, St. Kitts and Nevis reimagined tourism as a tool for empowerment. Wharton outlined several key policies implemented in the Federation to support this vision, including tax incentives for small locally owned businesses and protection of cultural heritage sites. She announced the upcoming launch of the Heart of the Community Incubator, which aims to empower Afro-descendant communities through marketing support, small business grants, and mentorship. Wharton concluded by aligning St. Kitts and Nevis with the broader OAS mission to uplift Afro-descendant heritage. By engaging with key industry players and championing community-centered heritage tourism, St. Kitts and Nevis is working to solidify its position as a top Caribbean destination while empowering its local communities. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank ECCB convened its 9th annual Growth and Resilience Dialogue with social partners to run from April 10th to 11th, 2025 at the ECCB headquarters, Sir Cecil Jacobs Auditorium in St. Kitts, under the theme, In the Pursuit of Extraordinary Excellence. The 2-day conference serves as a platform to address critical economic challenges and opportunities facing the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, ECCU. In his opening remarks, ECCB Governor Timothy N.J. Antwine underscored the importance of the bank's Big Push agenda, building resilience, human capital development, digital transformation, accelerating the renewable energy transition, and wealth creation through innovation and financial inclusion are key areas crucial for accelerating and sustaining growth. Acknowledging the turbulent global economic landscape, Antwine stated,
"Our guiding theme is in pursuit of extraordinary excellence. It ought to remind us of the bold actions required to deliver a big push agenda, which simply put is to double the size of our economies for shared prosperity for all. I must confess, I had intended to limit my remarks to the theme and sub-themes of this dialogue.
However, he felt compelled to address the current macroeconomic climate by quoting Jack Welch, the former CEO and chair of General Electric. He urged attendees to
embrace reality as it is, not as you would like it to be. Ladies and gentlemen, our dialogue convenes in a VUCA world. That is, a world characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. However, in light of the fundamental restructuring of the global economy now underway, the likes of which we have not seen since the Second World War, I am taking VUCA one step further by suggesting we are living in a VUCA with a AA world. What do I mean? A world pregnant with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and anxiety.
He cited inflation and a slowing global economy exacerbated by tariff wars as immediate concerns.
Inflation is a tax on everyone because it reduces the purchasing power of all. However, it is a particularly pernicious tax on the poor and our most vulnerable families as well as businesses, many of which are micro and small. Furthermore, the imposition of fines on ships originating out of China or made in China would increase shipping costs exorbitantly and also lead to significant price hikes on goods included in the construction sector, and raises the real prospect of unavailability or unaffordability. And that is something we have to contend with.
Simply put, increased shipping costs and price hikes due to fines on ships originating from or made in China could disproportionately affect the construction sector. Despite these challenges, Dr. Antoine reassured the public about the strength of the EC dollar.
We know this morning that our EC dollar remains strong. Yes, we know that for a certain fact. At this moment, the backing is 98%. The law requires us to be at 60%, with foreign reserves of $6 billion and growing. Our EC dollar has stood the test of time.
He attributed this stability to the ECCB's long-standing conservative policy of maintaining high stocks in foreign reserves. He dismissed any speculation about devaluation, stating,
So all this speculation about the devaluation of the EC dollar, that's one thing you do not have to worry about.
Governor Antoine urged the region to adopt a youth mindset, framing challenges as opportunities for greater self-reliance and resilience.
Such a mindset reframes our current challenges as opportunities and could propel our region in our lifelong pursuit of greater self-reliance and resilience. Second, we must now intensify our focus and implementation of the Big Push agenda, especially in the pursuit of food and nutrition security and energy security. And third, we must accelerate the scope and pace of regional integration and collective action.
He noted the challenges of the region's high food import bill, stating,
We have considerable work to do to reduce our food import bill because, as you can see, over the last several years, rather than declining, it has actually increased. And the thing about it is that when the economy rebounds, as we did after the pandemic, food imports actually go up. And that's what we've seen. So we got to get our food imports down, significantly down.
He noted that the ECCB recently disbursed $25 million to member countries to support efforts to boost food production. Regarding energy security, Governor Antoine highlighted the ECCB's investment in a 1 megawatt solar farm.
At ECCB, we, rather than lament our dependence on fossil fuels and the high cost of electricity, what did we do? We invested in a 1 megawatt solar farm, which you would have seen on entry to the bank, the largest non-utility plant in the ECCU.
Governor Antoine confirmed that the solar PV powers the ongoing dialogue and that the bank now saves $1.8 million annually in avoided energy costs. He welcomed the OECS Ministers of Energy's announcement of the Sustainable Green Energy Print, which aims to accelerate the transition to renewable energy.
Later this year, we hope to have Dominica come online with their 10 megawatt plant. They're looking towards, I think, December. We also know that in Nevis and in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis generally, there are significant plans to have geothermal in the Federation, and we are fully encouraging and supportive of those efforts, among others.
Governor Antoine challenged the region to reimagine its tourism model, drawing inspiration from Singapore.
Why limit ourselves to a seasonal tourism model? Consider Singapore, for example, which is on track to surpass its record for international arrivals this year. What is the secret? Singapore ensures that every season is a tourist season. It enhances attractions, accelerates digital transformation, uses strategic marketing, and expands global outreach. And therefore, they are in a position, Singapore, to keep their tourism offerings relevant all year long.
He suggested exploring opportunities to become a hub for remote work and enhancing attractions to keep tourism offerings relevant year-round. Addressing the importance of data, Governor Antoine quoted British mathematician Clive Humbly stating,
"Data is the new oil," suggesting that like oil, data must be refined and processed to unlock its true value. There are several challenges with data in our region.
He emphasized the need for a well-crafted data and AI strategy to enhance operational efficiencies and drive competitiveness. In concluding remarks, the governor emphasized the need for relentless pursuit of excellence. Referencing the collapse of the West Indies Federation in 1962, he urged the region to stand in solidarity and act together.
As the global economy fractures and restructures, will we come together to meet this moment? And will we do for ourselves what we can and must do for ourselves at home while we strenuously advocate abroad for just outcomes for small states such as ours? As we pursue our quest for extraordinary excellence, never forget, as a region, we cannot change our history and we cannot change our geography, but we can and must elevate our development trajectory through innovation and collective action.
The 9th Annual Growth and Resilience Dialogue was a collaborative effort between the ECCB, the OECS Commission, and the University of the West Indies, UE, and the World Bank. In regional news, St. Lucia's Chamber warns of trade fallout from U.S. tariff move. DBS St. Lucia reports.
U.S. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that the Trump administration has approved a 90-day pause on tariffs, lowering them to 10% due to negotiation requests from over 75 countries. The U.S. will hold targeted talks while keeping a universal 10% tariff in place. The European Union has also held off retaliation after the 90-day pause was announced. However, President Trump increased tariffs on Chinese goods to 125% after China imposed the 84% tariff on the U.S. What does this mean for St. Lucia? Brian Louisi, Executive Director of the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce, says that the situation is rapidly changing. St. Lucia exports a small range of goods to the U.S., mainly condiments and agricultural produce. He says that it is still unclear whether the tariffs will affect the cost of these goods.
So if we are in a global environment where free trade is no longer the order of the day, but rather we go into an era of protectionism and we're no longer following a rule-based system, which has been totally destroyed by Donald Trump, it is not very clear as to what the ramifications and what the implications and what the effects will be.
Louisi says that the outlook for global trade is uncertain. St. Lucia imports far more than it exports, mainly from the U.S., with most goods passing through the U.S. en route. However, he notes that the new trade rules should not affect goods in transit. Adding to the challenges, the U.S. Trade Representative has proposed up to a $1.5 million in port fees on Chinese-built ships entering the U.S. ports, aiming to counter China's shipbuilding dominance. These fees would apply to even non-Chinese companies using Chinese-built ships, potentially disrupting shipping-dependent industries. Louisi warns that this would disproportionately harm small islands like those in the Caribbean, which rely heavily on older, smaller Chinese-built vessels.
And so 1.5 million US applied across 100 containers versus across 10,000 containers. You do the maths, you could see the differential implications. Though yesterday we heard some attempts to clarify, and I don't necessarily want to say walk back, but the implications is that the USTR is saying that these are just proposals and they probably will not come into effect until November, and they may not be applied the way they are being interpreted.
Louisi adds that the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, SLASPA, urgently needs more attention and support. Over the past year, Issues like poor infrastructure, limited mechanical support, labor problems, and storage constraints have hurt both businesses and consumers. Since 95% of trade flows through SLASPA, Louisi says that inefficiencies at the port act like a 2 to 3% tax on the country, compounding costs down the value chain. He emphasizes the need for national collaboration to improve port operations. For the DBS News World, Miriam Montu reporting.
Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister says all eggs not in dragon basket. TTT Live Online has the details.
Despite what you're hearing, all of our eggs of Trinidad and Tobago are not in the dragon basket.
At a conference held by the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association on Wednesday morning, Prime Minister Stuart Young quickly responded to comments that TNT's energy future is solely dependent on a dragon gas deal. On Tuesday at a media conference, he announced that the license granted to the government of Trinidad and Tobago by the Office of Foreign Assets Controller OFAC of the United States to pursue the monetization of cross-border gas with Venezuela was revoked. Addressing the business community, Mr. Young said he was disappointed that some have been rejoicing following the announcement.
I'm just going to say very briefly here this morning that despite how unfortunately you see the media headlines, and despite how unfortunately it shocks me still that there are actually people who call themselves citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and they believe in Trinidad and Tobago is what they say, to see people rejoicing at another setback on what we did with Dragon.
But even despite that setback, Prime Minister Young said he was engaged with U.S. policymakers in Washington even after he made the announcement on Tuesday.
Without breaching confidentiality, I was engaged in the conversation with the policymakers in Washington. And that is the type of leadership that is necessary and needed. And it will unfold. The point is, within a matter of hours, we had the opportunity, only because of the relationships and the reputation that we have, that we were engaged immediately with those who are making the policy decisions.
He mentioned, though, that despite the revocation of the OFAC license, which affects both the Dragon gas deal and the Coquina Mannequin projects, TNT still has major projects in the pipeline.
You need to speak to your friends in the energy sector and you will see the growth of domestic projects and production of gas over the last few years. Just in the last couple of weeks, you've had the largest producer, BP, FID projects, and also announced significant success in other projects, all of which are the direct result of your government's leadership.
And in addition to this, he noted that other energy companies have been making strides.
You have the same thing going on with EOG. The Mento platform will produce gas shortly in a joint venture with BP. They have announced BP and EOG. The next one, Coconut. You have Perenco that has recently purchased some of BP's aged assets and then come and purchase some of Woodside's aged assets. You've seen that Perenco will do what they can with the stranded gas and produce more.
He also announced that CARICOM will meet on Friday to discuss the recent tariffs imposed by the United States. Sonolala, TTT News.
We now bring you these international reports.
It's been 6 weeks since Israel blockaded Gaza, and this is all Rehab Achras has left for her family of 13 to eat. She and many others live in this camp of plastic sheets in Khan Yunis. The bombs haven't killed them, but hunger will, she says. If Israel doesn't open the checkpoints it has sealed off since the start of March.
We have survived the war and we've survived the airstrikes as we wake up and go to sleep. But we can't survive hunger, neither us or our children. Open the crossings and let the children eat and we eat. The sick people and the patients need food.
In Nuseirat, an outdoor emergency kitchen is on its last legs. Emergency meal distributions like this are ending. Israel has cut off all supplies to Gaza's 2.3 million residents. Food stockpiled during a ceasefire at the start of the year has all but run out. Aid agencies, who supply the emergency meals, say they will have to stop them within days, unless they can bring in more food. Niamah Fadjallah says she treks through the war zone every day. leaving at 6 a.m. in the hope of a plate of rice for her children. The World Food Programme used to provide bread to 25 bakeries across the Gaza Strip. All are now shut, and it says it will soon have to halt food parcel distribution. Juliet Toomer of the UN's UNRWA agency.
All basic supplies are running out. The markets are also running out of basics. There was a black market in Gaza. Now it's a very, very black market. And what I mean by that is that the prices of commodities have exponentially increased over the past 1 month plus. Babies, children are going to bed hungry every day without these basic supplies. Gaza inches closer towards very, very deep hunger.
Every Gazan can now quote the fantastical prices for the little food left. A 55-pound sack of flour that used to sell for $6 now costs 10 times as much. A quarter gallon of cooking oil, if you can find it, costs $10 instead of $1.50. Medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières says it is encountering children and pregnant women with severe malnutrition. Lactating mothers are too hungry to be able to breastfeed. Israel denies that Gaza is facing a hunger crisis. The military accuses Hamas militants of exploiting aid and says it must keep supplies out to prevent the fighters from getting it. Hamas denies this. Back in Khan Yunis, Ahras says she believes Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu means to kill them.
We are being humiliated. He wants to kill us slowly and we'll die slowly.
The trade war between Washington and Beijing is showing no signs of easing. China's 84% tariff on all US imports has taken effect. The government has also announced it will reduce the number of American movies shown here, the world's second largest film market.
China does not want a trade war, but we are not afraid of one.
US President Donald Trump raised trade taxes on Chinese goods to 125%. At the same time, he paused so-called reciprocal tariffs on other countries for 90 days. Analysts say it's clear Washington is trying to isolate Beijing.
Trump's overriding objective remains unchanged. He wants to take a sledgehammer to the rules-based global trade system, and he wants to confront China forcefully.
Despite the escalation, China's financial markets closed higher on Thursday. The Shanghai and Shenzhen were up between 1% and 2%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng also rose 2%. Beijing's state funds have poured billions of dollars into stabilizing stock markets. Senior leaders are reportedly meeting this week to discuss measures to bolster the economy and employment.
It's pure pain. There's really no gain so far in this tariff war. We're going to see a lot of bankruptcies in SMEs, and that will be a big pressure for the labor market.
Chinese manufacturers are holding their breath. Many orders have already been suspended or cancelled. Some shipments to the US have reportedly been ditched mid-voyage to avoid the crushing duties. Beijing has condemned the additional US tariffs, but says its door remains open to negotiation, as long as any dialogue is based on mutual respect. Chinese social media users say US President Trump is disrespecting their country and targeting it unfairly. Nationalistic posts supporting the government's countermeasures have gone viral. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
Now, rescue workers in the Dominican Republic have ended their search for survivors of a nightclub roof collapse. Officials say that 218 bodies have now been recovered from the Jet Set Club in Santo Domingo. The roof came down in the early hours of Tuesday during a concert by a well-known merengue singer, Ruby Perez. He was among those killed. It is the Caribbean country's worst disaster in decades. Well, we can cross over to speak to Will Grant, who's in Santo Domingo, the capital of the Dominican Republic, and a really difficult day there, Will.
Yeah, it really has been a difficult few days, and now the authorities are essentially bowing to the inevitable with this situation. It has moved officially from a search and rescue operation seeking survivors to officially a recovery operation of the victims' bodies. In that sense, that reflects the fact that 218 people are known to have died in the collapse of the nightclub behind me, the Jet Set nightclub. Just hugely shocking, as you said in your introduction. Now the worst such accident in Dominican history, and the family members who are here waiting for that news unfortunately have now received that tragic news, or indeed identified the bodies of their relatives in a sort of makeshift morgue that's just to one side of the bill.
And Will, when it comes to the venue itself, is there an understanding of how this happened?
Well, that is what the question will be now that this has moved into the recovery phase. I think the questions are going to ramp up onto exactly why this took place, how it happened. A lot of fingers of blame are being pointed at a fire that took place here in 2023. The question being, of course, were the proper repairs carried out at the time? Was too much weight placed onto a vulnerable roof? Was the entire building structurally compromised and not made safe? The owner of the nightclub has flown into the Dominican Republic from the United States, living to continue, he says, to comply with the authorities. He says that he and his team, management team, have been completely transparent with the investigations and intend to remain so. But of course, extremely tough questions. I spoke to the mayor of this municipality, and she said the families themselves would keep the pressure on to find the answers to those questions.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
Sedema encourages self-reliance within the region as geopolitical tensions rise globally.
Sentencing handed down in 2 separate wounding cases. St. Kitts Tourism Authority engages key partners at SMART and champions heritage tourism at OAS Congress. ECCB governor urges big push for ECCU economies amidst global economic anxiety. St. Lucia's Chamber warns of trade fallout from U.S. tariff move. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister says all eggs not in dragon basket. Internationally, 6 weeks into Israel's Gaza blockade, last food is running out.
Thank you for listening.